Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the Wealth Amplifier podcast. I'm Matt Liebman, joined today by Aaron Marks and Patrick Swift. Hello, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Hello there.
And it's good to be back. You guys did a nice job recording at least one episode without me when I was on my July abroad. And why don't we dive into today's topic? Pat, you want to lay out the plan for the episode?
Sure. And we missed you in July, Matt. Hopefully we were up to par without you. We did our best. And I apologize for anybody watching on YouTube. As I mentioned in a few podcasts, I just moved. So my office is a work in progress. I've got TVs and clocks and stuff on the floor behind me. So excuse the background. But yeah, today's topic. So we were kicking this around. It just came up in a handful of client meetings. It comes up often in client meetings. So I think it's just a good topic. But the idea or the topic itself is people's preference to have income when they are entering retirement, or just in general, the preference for income on a monthly basis and the security that it brings us sometimes psychologically versus having a large war chest of savings. So using a brief example to paint the picture, if you are heading into retirement and you have $5 million, let's say, in liquid assets and savings, but no pension, no, let's call it income generating real estate or other income generating types of investments per se, versus retiring, let's say, with $1 million in liquid savings and assets, but having, let's call it a large pension or an income generating rental property, and the dynamics that are at play when clients think about their retirement, how they feel about their monthly income and expenses, where there's some flaw and some bias, and how to work through it. That's the topic. How did I do?
Very well.
You did great.
It hits a lot of angles. It hits a lot of angles. Even more, the lump sum, take a lump sum pension or the annual pension. Do you take cash out of your account and go buy a car with that cash, or do you go finance it? I know there's not income there, but do you want the asset or do you not, and have less payments or more? But now if you have more payments, but you might have cash in your pocket, there's just so many angles to look at it.
Yeah.
No, that's true. And it's also a somewhat indicative as a topic of the changing times as a society. A generation or two, most people that were able to retire lived on a pension, to your point, Pat, a defined benefit pension, along with Social Security and other constant streams of cash flow. With the rise of the 401k and defined contribution plans and the decline of pensions, this mix has changed a lot. I know I think in a lot of ways to the good. I know we have at least one client I can think of who's a very senior executive in the defined benefit space. So if he's listening, is probably cringing at me calling the shift a good thing. But I think it's had some positive benefits for society.
It's interesting that you start that way, Matt, because I was going to kind of ask you guys. It's almost as a society, a country. We've talked on this podcast about how our experiences are what shape our financial personality. So the way we grew up with money, the way our guardians or parents interacted with money, our own experience paying for different things in our lives, whatever the case is. I think as a country, if you broaden that out, you're right. I mean, for a lot of folks that are retiring today, the baby boomer generation, look at their parents. They mostly had fixed pension types of retirement, and that was it. Social Security, probably not a whole lot of liquid savings that they had a lot of control over, maybe. And that has an enormous impact on how we all and today's retirees think about, their the security or the stability of their monthly inflows, if you will. Yeah, I think.
Real quick, we're actually not doing articles today, but the main article today on Wall Street Journal is about as Generation X approaches retirement, reality still bites, and it talks about Gen Xers launched their careers at the start of a massive shift in how Americans work. Companies move from pensions that promise steady income after years of service to plans such as 401ks that place employees' retirement destiny in their own hands.
So I have to interject there. That headline, read that again. And given that neither of you are Gen X, I want to make sure you followed the inference they were getting at there.
As Generation X approaches retirement, reality still bites.
All right. So you're both millennials, right?
Right.
I don't know what I am. Maybe that's a sign of being a millennial, not knowing what I am.
No, I know who you are. So do you see what they were doing there with that headline? I assume, but I don't want to be presumptuous.
Calling us all old?
No. Okay. See, no, when they say reality bites was like the seminal movie for Gen Xers. So that with Winona Ryder, Ethan Hawke, a young Ben Stiller, right over your head. See,
I know the movie, but it definitely went right over my head.
It was big in the early '90s, like Seattle grunge band soundtrack in that era.
Good era.
Little education for the young guys here. So,
thanks for illuminating us.
Yeah, there you
if
go.
You weren't here. If this were last month, we would have just read the headline and moved on.
But that's what they were doing there.
Nugget.
Yes.
So maybe let's go through some pros and cons, because like almost anything in personal financial planning, there's almost never a right or a wrong or a black and a white. It's often gray. So either using those kind of examples of a retiree or just in general on this topic, like what are some pros and cons? I'll kick off with one. For example, I find, again, obviously we're saying most people, let's say 9 out of 10 people, have a preference for income because this is the seemingly stable and security that it brings them. However, I also find that people have a propensity to spend, not always, but spend up to what they're bringing in on a monthly basis, which is not always a great general tactic for overall, financial welfare. Versus those who have a high asset level usually means two things. They've saved well, clearly, and they've probably also saved well because they've been afraid to spend their savings.
That's what I was going to say. It's that component. It's the saver's mentality. Like the money goes in and you don't want to take it out because you've spent so long putting it in.
Right.
Yeah, I will. A client, long-term client of my dad's, who I work with as well, who I've mentioned on the podcast before. But I remember once discussing with him, well, what about your cash flow needs and so on? He's like, not familiar with the concept, was his answer. It's just like the ultimate one-way street guy. So, and there is some of that mindset there.
Yeah.
Which is what we coach. Like we coach this in so many other podcasts and just in general. One-way investment street, maybe the most important type of savings account you can have, having framework around it. But then when you do that well for 30 or 40 years, how do you then shift that mindset?
It's tough to flip the switch. It is. So I think, to your point, Pat, everybody comes at this with their own biases, their own life experience, but also their own professional bias. I know people in our role who have built careers on the whole idea of, I'm going to buy you something that generates income. What really matters is how much income your investments generate, not the total return, not growth, just income. So as you might imagine, I have some opinions on that. But before I dive in, what are your thoughts on that approach? And I'm sure you've probably seen it in the industry as well, although a larger percentage of your career was also the zero interest rate time. So it became quite tricky for those people. But I'm just curious what you think of that approach.
So when that conversation comes up with clients, I often steal a Nick Murray adage, which is if you had a well in your backyard, which very few people have these days, but if you did, and you were drawing water from it for your daily lifestyle, and you got rainfall in that well, let's call that income, or you got snowfall in that well, let's call that growth. Either way, you've got water in your well, and that's what you need to draw from. So who cares, right? Both should be good for you. To your point, and to this whole topic, most people in that example would be upset about the snowfall, but they would love the rainfall. And to us, it shouldn't really matter as much. And I think I use like a financial example of that, that I almost used in a meeting with a client yesterday, but did not. Where, like, let's say you have an income that's, you put $100,000 into it, and over the course of 10 years, it pays you 10% a year. So you get $100,000 back from it, right? So your $100,000 is still worth $100,000, but you got paid $100,000 that whole time. And let's say you were paying taxes on that $100,000 over that full 10-year period. So 10 grand a year, you're paying some taxes on that. Versus you bought, let's say, Microsoft or something like that. I'm not, saying you should buy Microsoft, but that investment grew from the year you bought it at $100,000 to year 10, $200,000. You never sold any of it. You didn't pay any taxes on any of that yet because you haven't sold it yet. Technically, you did better on that investment. You didn't pay any taxes, and it's worth more. But in someone's brain, if they're looking at their portfolio or if they're focusing on income, they would be like, but I don't have any money to spend. You're like, well, actually, you have an investment that grew. So it's almost the same concept. So
long-term capital gains rates, most likely, in a lot of cases, lower than income rates.
Right.
Matt, do you remember? I hope this lands. You remember these things better than I do, so you'll get it. What was the statistic that somebody, I think it was BlackRock, that said it was like an income-producing investment, but X percent of the time the income never gets spent?
Yep. So I don't remember the exact number, nor the exact firm, but in my head, for some reason, I think it was Franklin Templeton.
I think as you're saying that, I think you might be right.
Because they had that income fund that's been around forever. It's like one of the first, income funds, old mutual fund. I think it's been around for 50, 60 years, whatever, maybe longer. And I believe the number was something on the order of about 2/3 of the people that owned the seminal income fund didn't take any income from the fund and just reinvested those dividends. So that, and my numbers may be off, but like roughly 2/3 of the people that wanted the income fund, to Pat's point, with the well and the snow and the rain. And by the way, he's encroaching on your metaphor turf, Aaron. But to Pat's point there, most people that were even investing in the income fund were just using it as a form of total return. They were not even using the income.
Right. We get that a lot, day to day. Hey, let's buy this thing that produces income, but you don't end up spending it. We just take it and reinvest, and then, just peel some off the top to spend. You could just have a growth investment that you're peeling off the top, long-term capital gains rates potentially, and not income that you're then paying a higher rate and spending.
And go ahead, Pat.
No, go ahead. You're good. Go ahead.
So I'll share my views on it, which have probably already leaked out on past episodes or how we've been here. And I will give my dad credit for this because I think he instilled this in me. But it's no secret, he's still in the industry after 55 years. Most of his contemporaries are not, and I think because his view is very much in vogue now, but was not back then. And that is the real thing people should be focused on is investing for total return. Not for income, not for growth, but the combination. To your point, and the reason for that is it's sustainable and more evergreen. It is not situation or economy specific. There can be times when interest rates are at zero. So what are you supposed to stretch and buy the junkiest high yield bond fund you can have just to get that coupon credit, or go do some real estate deal to speculate? And there are times when growth is zero. And so if you're purely a growth investor, you're supposed to just, take your beating and just keep losing money because I'm a growth investor. No, the idea is they are both components of a total return. And you want sustainable total returns. And what you don't want to do, and what I feel strongly about, and why I am not a big fan of pure income investing, is you really do not want to limit your investment universe. I've seen, my dad would take this further and say, and he's probably right, but he has more experience, seen it more than I have, but he's seen many more people lose money speculating to get a little bit more income than he's seen them actually lose money in a diversified stock portfolio over the years. And that's not saying don't own bonds, but we do own bonds for people. There is a place for that. But you need a broader investment universe that is not specific to one very narrow type of investing.
I was introduced to somebody 8-10 years ago, a prospective client that was 90% of her portfolio was invested in energy master limited partnerships. So typically high income, but very volatile.
And that must have ended terribly for her.
So I looked at her statement and I said, hey, look, you were down 35% last year. She goes, yeah, but I still got my income. Okay. Well, how about just don't invest at all? Your principal stays the same and you take a little bit off. And then there you're down like 2%. You're not down 35%. And that income, gene in your head, whatever you're born with, that it's hard to kick.
It is. And to me, so we'll put some numbers and some ideas behind this too. So we obviously work and do a fair amount of comprehensive planning around retirement for everyone, which is a major goal for most people's portfolios. And we look at the tax impacts and what's the most tax efficient way for someone to go about funding their retirement, especially in their early years. And to me, I find for those who do not have fixed income as part of their retirement so much, so they don't have a pension, they don't have a whole bunch of business income or real estate income or whatever, they don't have a whole lot of income. That normally will translate to what's going to be some pretty lean or low tax years, which, by the way, psychologically, we tend to love. Like, everyone loves income. They also hate paying taxes. And there is some correlation factor to, if you have income, you are going to pay higher taxes. So when you're entering your initial retirement years, let's say you haven't even taken Social Security, you might have some golden opportunities for things that we talk about all the time. One thing that I think gets talked about very little is the progressive nature of capital gains tax rates. So what I mean by that is, if you're entering retirement, you have no income. You don't have a job anymore. You don't have real estate passive income. You don't have any distributions that you're going to be paying taxes on. But you're simply going to be selling investments that you own to make up your lifestyle need, which is often a tax efficient way to start taking money out. Then great. You're going to have long-term capital gains, presumably, if your portfolio is done well. And then in 2024, as an example, if you're married, you're going to be able to take about $95,000 of long-term capital gains and pay 0% in capital gains taxes on them. That's a slam dunk compared to if you were earning, let's call it $500,000 the year before you retired, and you took those same gains and maybe paid 24% with the Medicare surtax. So that's an enormous opportunity. We have talked, so I won't beat it to death, but about Roth conversions, those are always going to be income oriented taxable events. And if you have some golden years early in retirement where your income is low and lean, you can probably do a whole bunch of Roth conversions, moving money from your IRA to your Roth IRA, paying the taxes on that at a much lower rate than you otherwise would have if you had done it during your working years. And there's quite a few more examples of that ilk that we could go into, but those are all things that, to me, that gives you a beautiful slate to really hammer home some awesome retirement planning strategies early on, if you've got the flexibility around your tax burden.
And I think a lot of the income investing mindset that you mentioned, and I just used the word mindset, is really just another form of a behavioral finance bias.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily an evil thing or a bad thing. It's that we work around clients' behavioral biases all the time. We do have some clients that really are very, very income focused. We try to convert them to more of a total return mindset. But what I think is important, no matter what your focus is some degree of consistency. And in that, what you don't want to be is the income-based investor who then wonders why they don't own NVIDIA or feels left out of the stock market when it's going up. Mm-hmm. And I find what happens behaviorally sometimes is that people always want more of what was best most recently. That is not different in retirement planning, investing. For example, I do remember, I think 2011 was a time where the markets were pretty rough. It was the first debt ceiling fiasco, and the markets were really struggling, and it wound up flat on the year. But dividend stocks, if I'm remembering the year correctly, did rather well. And I kept getting calls from clients at that time. You know what I really like? I really like dividends. And I remember finally just saying to one of them, no, I actually don't. I send them back. Because of course, who wouldn't like dividends? It's part of the total return. I'm not anti-dividend, not anti-interest, coupon payment. But again, with an investment, there are a couple positive things that can happen. You can get paid a cash flow in the form of dividends or interest. That's money. That's good. You can see the price go up. That's good. But there are all kinds of bad things that can happen. price going down, to Aaron's point with the MLPs, taxes, Pat, to your point, expenses is another one that's out there. So anyway, long-winded rant saying that people really need to focus on the total picture, not very narrow set.
Yeah.
Well said.
Very well said.
And that's 20 minutes on the dot.
20 minutes
Perfect.
on the dot. Yeah.
Let's talk hoagies. What you got?
Oh, all right. It's summertime. For those of you watching, you see Pat's windows open. Beautiful
Although it
day
does
out.
feel like fall today, which I am loving. Not to interrupt you, but
I have the quarter zip on. It's fall. It's quarter zip weather.
yeah.
It was 52 degrees this morning.
Yeah, I turned off my AC, and I'm usually like, I sleep like a polar bear with like cold. Didn't even need it.
So the reason I mentioned summer, so for those of you, we have a global audience here, so I'm not going to assume that everybody knows all the Jersey Shore towns, but for those of you who are not familiar, Margate and other shore towns have special.
Ooh, are you going to do a DiNic review?
I am doing a Dino's review.
Oh, okay. Let's
So
hear
this
it.
could be controversial. I think some people are really going to feel what I say, and I feel like some people are really going to be offended. I actually, before I bring your dad into this, because I don't remember the exact line or quote, and again, you probably will better than I, but let's just start here. Dino's is one of these staple places down in Margate, the Jersey Shore. A lot of people from Philadelphia head that way, and we go every year, this and that. So I already have my preconceived notions on Dino's. So first thing, when you walk in, and some people probably love this lady and some people don't, there's this gruff old lady. What do you want? You know, and you're like bothering her when you tell her you want, this or that. And so Matt, do you remember what happened to your dad there?
Yes. All right.
Go
So
ahead.
the precursor to this lady was a gruffer, older lady when I was a kid. And I will say one of my best trainings for this business, as an aside, from the time I was like 4 years old or 5 years old, I remember my dad would hand me like we didn't use credit cards as much. It was like a $20 bill. And I used to go into Dino's to pick up the order and deal with these like crazy people yelling at me and this woman. So anyway, it was good training. But my dad's story was he went in and said, I'll have whatever it was, let's say Italian hoagie, whatever, with no oil and no mayo. That's all he said. She drops her pencil on the counter, does a full 360 just in disgust, and says, "You mean dry?" And anybody that knows my dad, he's not easily intimidated, nor does he. And he just says, and he said, "Well, I mean no oil or mayo. If you want to write dry, you can write dry."
Yeah. So you're getting the essence of Dino's.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that interaction.
Yeah. I remembered most of it, but in my mind, it was this glorious moment that he,
Yes, stood up to the Dino's lady.
What do you mean I should have it some other way?
Right.
So I'm always disgusted when you go in there. So anyway, I didn't go pick them up. My wife, Emily, did. She came back and said, actually, it was a young crowd. They were very pleasant. It was very easy, no line. So I a couple points are coming for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of people like the New Jersey Shore rolls, which are a big thing. Some people love them. Some people don't. Not my favorite. Anyway, we did a turkey, a tuna, and an Italian with our very good friends, Jared and Julie. Hopefully they're listening. Julie and I split everything. And let me tell you what, a lot of mediocrity in Dino's, I think.
Wow.
People love it. Not my thing. And I think there's a definite gap between the turkey and then the Italian and the tuna. And the turkey was beyond plain. I mean, it's just bread and turkey. And, they have the peppers that I like, but could use a little more flavor. The Italian was better. It's not your South Philly artisan meats and cheeses and all that sort of stuff, but solid. And the tuna is really good, but it is just a mess. It's all over the place. If you put anything on there, it's shooting out the side and this and that. So, it's you're on the beach, the seagulls are coming at you and you're swatting them away. So you've got to fend off everything that's coming at you. But as a staple kind of a place, it is not at the top of my list. Other places down the shore, Sacco's, White House. White House, I think, is the best of them, and we'll review that one later. But I'm going to give separate scores here to the turkey and then tuna Italian. Turkey, and this is a nod to another one of our listeners who says I'm not hard enough. I'm too nice. it's a 5'9" turkey. Nothing to write home about. Plain, boring. I'll leave it at that. Tuna, we'll put aside the messiness, and the Italian, those are solid. I don't get into the eights, but it's close. So a 7-9. And everything would have been worse if it was that lady was there. But because she wasn't, that's where the scores are.
All
and
right.
Matt, what's your feeling on Dinos?
So I am very biased when it comes to Dinos because it's been like an institution in my family since I was born. And we've been, I used to like Sacco's actually the best down there, but I think they closed one of their locations. I forget if they might have. Yeah. And White House is like the famous place, almost like Pat Steaks in Philly and that whole thing, which is, a bit of an ordeal, but very good as well. I'm a big fan of Dino's. I don't get the turkey hoagie. I don't get the tuna. I just get the Italian. So
the Italian was good.
And the Italian is good there. It is a different, to your point about the artisan meats and all of that, it is much more of what I think of, and I hope I'm not offending anyone because I maybe I'm making the distinction wrong, but what I think of is sort of an Italian-American sub shop as opposed to an Italian sub shop.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Well,
and within that context, I'm still a big fan of Dino's. So
if you're in that context, I can see higher scores when you're looking at the universe of Italians and what it could be and couldn't be. I think my score holds, but that's why it's up for debate, or maybe it's not. That is the score.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, have you ever heard of this place? I was just looking it up while you were talking. Florida Cold Cuts down there?
I have not.
A friend of mine down there just said, I've never been to it. He said he's gone recently because he's sort of tired of the traditional places down there and said it was great, but I've never been. So maybe Labor Day weekend, I'll check it out.
All right. Usually you get all the places in Florida that say, Philly this, Philly that, or New York bagels, whatever. You don't usually get Florida cold cuts or Florida something.
No, I was skeptical for that reason when he gave me the name. It's not when I think of like, you know what, I want a great sandwich, I'm going to Florida. That doesn't really resonate with me. So, but we'll see.
Yeah. So there's my Dino's review.
All right. Fair enough. So, go ahead, Pat.
No, you're good. Very well said. I've not been to Dino's, and now I don't know if I'm craving it because I appreciate the review, but I would like to get down and try it.
And in terms of just shifting gears for a minute, I want to just highlight, and we'll do a thorough review of our predictions on the predictions episode, but I wanted to have a moment of mourning because I'm probably about to be wrong on my contrarian prediction at the beginning of the year when everybody was calling for 6 Fed cuts, Federal Reserve rate cuts, and I said 0. I was going strong, and I said, and then they might be ready to cut right around September, October, but they won't do it because of the election. It looks like they're going to do it. So it's been a good run, but I will have to say goodbye to that prediction.
I think you can hold on for a surprise. Not that I think it's coming, but everybody, 100% of the betting markets are on a cut in September.
Yeah.
They don't like to be people pleasers. They're doing their own thing.
That's true. But there was one other prediction, though, and this will segue. I think, and we have to listen to the episode. I think one of the questions, maybe it was an over/under thing. I said, will anybody other than Trump or Biden get an electoral vote in the election? And I think I said yes. I forget what everybody's answers were. I don't think I had the Kamala Harris card, but it looks like someone other than Trump or Biden will get an electoral vote, given that Biden's no longer in the election.
It's funny. I was thinking about that. I thought you were going to say, well, the answer is no, because I just figured it was just Harris or Trump. But the reality is, yes, it is not Biden. So good point.
So it's Harris, right? Right.
There was a wrinkle in there that we did not consider. We were thinking would there be one? Now it's, half or whatever.
So speaking of which, 80 days out, anybody want to go on record with a prediction, or we want to punt that to the side for a future episode?
I think we squirm over here.
Yeah, me too.
All right. But Pat, I'm pretty confident it's not going to be RFK Jr. anymore.
Yeah, I guess. Unfortunately not, it sounds like.
I can't tell you how many of my phone calls people are just disgusted with the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's generally what I have garnered as well, which is probably a good thing, I guess. I think that's the right take. No offense.
Yeah.
I don't mean to offend
I
anyone,
don't know
but I
that
think that's the right
disgust is a
take.
good thing, but okay.
letting my own opinion out a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like, I guess, just in terms of context, like I felt in 2020, and it was a little bit of an insane time in 2020 for a variety of reasons, but I felt like there were some more hardline opinions that I was hearing from people that I was talking to. And this time it feels a little more relaxed. That's all.
I should do agree with that, and maybe it's because we're only in August. Maybe the next month or
Right.
two, you've got a debate, what, September 10th or something like that. You'll start to explode again.
Right. So you're right in terms of what I'm hearing anecdotally on opinions, but what happened over about a 6-week period this summer was absolutely insane.
Yeah,
I mean, from that crazy debate to the assassination attempt to Biden dropping out to Harris.
Like people forget.
Yeah, it was almost like Harris was going to be dropped from the ticket. Next thing you know, she's at the top of the ticket and then at the top of the polls. I mean, it's been quite a volatile ride, and I imagine that is not over. I imagine we will see more peaks and troughs from both sides before Election Day.
Yeah.
So besides political coverage, what is everybody watching, reading, and anything to amplify as our closing segment here?
I'm in a post Olympic funk, I think, because we had put everything on hold. We were watching the Olympics, had a great time with that, and now I'm just aimlessly, watching The Office and whatever other random Step Brothers was on like 4 times in the last week, so I kept watching that. I've got nothing. I think it's just classic end of the summer. I need some fall regularity to get back in a TV and reading rhythm.
Yeah, I think the same. I think with a bunch of shows that I was watching ended, and then I've been moving, it feels like, the last couple of weeks, or getting like organized, I should say. So haven't watched anything good. Reading a fictional book. Nothing of note there. I will say I'm excited, especially with the weather that's upon us at the moment, for football season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't anyone watched Hard Knocks?
So I watched, that's why I just brought that up too. I watched the Giants offseason one, which I didn't even realize. I was a big fan of Hard Knocks for years. Hadn't watched the last handful, and didn't even realize, I guess the NFL literally has it covering like most of the calendar. They do an off-season Hard Knocks season, which is what the Giants were on, which was like January through July coverage, basically. And then they have the classic training camp, which is the Bears, I think, right now. And then they do an in-season as well, which they did with the Dolphins last year, which is interesting. It almost feels like overkill. Like, I used to just really like the training camp. I watched the Giants one, wasn't impressed. Kind of just depressing.
Well, I would say, wasn't impressed with the show or the Giants?
The Giants.
Got it.
Yeah.
No, football season is upon us, and the Eagles are somehow opening in Brazil. That is just totally weird, but I'm excited to see that. And
what about you, Matt?
And I also I'm very intrigued to see how the Eagles faithful do on their trip to Brazil to see the game. Hopefully, there are no major international incidents down in South America. In terms of watching, I think since I was last on the podcast, so I probably finished this maybe about a month ago, but watched the show Presumed Innocent with Jake.
Oh, yeah, I watched that.
That's on my list. I thought that was a movie, actually. Is it a series?
I think it was a book, and I think I think it was a movie, and then they just made it into a series.
It's a movie with Harrison Ford in like 92 or something like that.
That's right.
It's not a current movie. The release on Netflix is a series.
It's a series. Yeah.
It's on Apple TV.
Apple.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
It was a good show. It was, I liked it at least. And also was a nice boost to the ego because I predicted the outcome and scored some points on that. So that was good. Haven't read anything great this summer, but I am going tonight to the Bruce Springsteen concert. So that is my that's my amplification of the boss.
Nice. Good stuff. All right, end of the summer is here, so hopefully everybody enjoys it.
Yes, and we have this podcast. We have another one with an investment-oriented guest coming up soon, and then we'll have a full fall slate as well. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.